it's Ryan from Red Panda Recording. I'm here with Joshua Valleau at his studio in Brooklyn, The Glass Wall. Josh, thanks for having us here for a studio hang.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, happy to be here. Lot of great. Let's start with the synths. I mean, we're sitting in a labyrinth of synthesizers.
Yeah, okay, sure.
But this is your background, right? You started as a keyboard player.
Is it my? I guess it's my background. Yeah. No, I'm just joking. Yeah, I'm a keyboard player. So started on bunch of Casios in the 80s, and
now, did you really start on Casios?
Yeah, I have my first Casio. Actually.
Oh yeah,
yeah, literally.
Okay, because I was envisioning the 4-year-old piano prodigy, like 2 hours a day, that kind of a thing. But it was more of a. You were with keyboards from the beginning, in a sense, from the beginning.
Yeah, not but like piano. We didn't get a piano until I was 9, I think.
Okay.
Or 10. Maybe around my 10th birthday.
Okay.
My sister started first, and then I started a little bit after that. So
was there a lot of music happening in your family? Okay.
Yeah, my dad was a musician when I was a kid, and he played the guitar and the pedal steel. And he played like 6 nights a week. It was incredibly active. And yes, there was music around, but we never had any classical music around when I was a kid, so I didn't discover that till later. So when I was, I guess, 11, I was lying in bed listening to the radio, and I was listening to college radio, and I heard a Beethoven sonata come on the radio, and blew my mind.
Yeah.
So then after that, I kind of just focused on that music for a while.
Now, did you leave the keyboards behind, and you were primarily on acoustic piano at that time?
Yeah, I kind of always think that I forgot about electricity for maybe like a decade from when I was just like kind of blocked it out. And it, there were sporadic influences here and there of computers and synthesis. And once I got to college, I started checking out DJing and turntables and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then a couple years in, I ended up buying a computer, actually just for the specific purpose of buying a copy of Finale and not writing out any more arrangements by hand.
Sure.
So that's how I got into computers, unfortunately. And then I had a really frustrating time, like in the 90s, on Windows machines and stuff. And Windows 3.1, 95, 98, XP, and then I started buying samplers, and so that's kind of the way I got back out. My brain exploded in the late 90s, and you can't go back.
Sure.
It's just like you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
So in a lot of ways, you were involved with computers or computer audio since mid to late 90s. So kind of the start of.
Yeah, it was funny. I actually I did this piano competition. I made a tape for like an entry for something, and I went to record it at a place in Poughkeepsie, and this guy, a friend of my dad's, had a friend who ran a recording studio, and it was Paul Antonell at the Clubhouse, which I've actually been back to in recent years, and it's amazing. He's still got the same Neve and everything. It's like, whoa. And the first time I ever saw a waveform on a screen was like a 486 machine, and Paul had come to record me on location with 2 414s to a DAT, and we went back to the studio, and he loaded the DAT onto the sound tools, I guess.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. At that point, probably.
Yeah. Blew my mind, and so I look at waveforms all day. And so that was the first time I ever saw one.
So fast forward a couple years through college, then you find yourself on the road?
Wow, yeah, there was... so I went to college in the 20th century.
Okay.
And then I graduated and did a bunch of random stuff. 2001... 2002 and 3, I worked on Wall Street.
Okay.
And then I quit Wall Street and got back into music. I kind of quit music for a couple of years, which was one of the couple things that I did that was sort of like a detour. maybe not such a great idea, but
not a lot of piano playing on Wall Street.
I thought there'd be more,
Yeah.
But yeah, actually, I kind of like some of these detours have helped me refine my vision and sort of like cut out extraneous ways of thinking about things, and kind of got me focused in the right direction. So that was one, and I got into some real estate stuff a few years later. That was kind of like another one. It was sort of like a non-musical thing that cost me a bunch of time and money. But yeah, I got back into music in 2004, and then it was about a year later I ended up on the road with John. So I was just like grinding in the trenches in the city and working for like 12 or 13 different bands and like MDing a bunch of projects and stuff. And
yeah, now that sounds like a pretty quick transition if you sort of left music by the wayside, or at least as your primary focus for a few years, and then within a year you're touring and MDing for John Legend. Is that?
Yeah, I wasn't actually MDing. Swiss Chris was the MD.
Oh, right.
As Rocky pointed out in his video.
Yes.
What's up, Rocky?
Episode 1, episode 2.
Yeah. That's the through line of these episodes.
Right.
Yeah, I was programming the show and doing like a lot of still computer-based stuff. I actually got that show onto software, which was kind of it's kind of a lot at that time. It was like 2005 and 6, and so we were using hardware for like samples and playback and stuff. And it was like, hey, let's check out Ableton. Like,
right.
Let's like buy a bunch of laptops and check out Ableton.
So were you doing? You were in the touring bands, and then were you also doing the recordings as well?
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about John's? Yeah, I was around. I didn't really do a ton.
Okay.
But I was sort of like, there was a lot of stuff that happened that we did the playback tracks, and then there was people came through, and I remember like a long development period of like where there was a lot of material being auditioned. People were coming in and playing beats and stuff at the cutting room.
Mm-hmm.
I remember 88 Keys came in and played like 20 beats straight off an MPC. Like he came with the MPC 2000 and straight off the train under his arm, no case, and just plugged it in, and then like put a floppy in, loaded up like beat after beat. So yeah, I was like around a lot, and I was doing programming for stuff.
So were you there if it was, hey, can you pull up this sound from the live show, or we need that keyboard thing?
Yeah, all kinds of stuff like that.
Kind of a technical whiz in that regard?
Yeah, pretty much. And then several more years of touring. And I got to play with a bunch of artists along the way, and work in a bunch of different cool situations. And then I kind of got sort of like reached the end of the natural progression of that. Like it felt like I really, really was like waking up in a different country and really happy and excited to be on the gig, but more excited to try to be back in the studio and making records and recording things, hitting record, writing. And I had this room right at the tail end of that. I found this place here. So that was kind of where I was like, I want to go back to that room and just work on stuff, and try to learn how to make a record.
Yeah.
So, and I worked in a bunch of pretty awesome studios at that point. We had done the Alice Smith record at the Manhattan Center in 2004 and 2005. And that was kind of wrapping up at the end of 2000, or right, as I was going on tour, they were sort of dovetailing a little bit. And even in college in the late 90s, I worked on a couple of records in cool studios and like got the chance to check out consoles and like check out some outboard and like, do some recording stuff.
So you're sort of learning and picking up things, as being the guy in the session or in the room. Are you kind of taking notes of things or asking questions? Like, where's that curiosity starting?
Yeah, actually, there's a really funny story. When I got kicked out of the dorm in college for just being too insane, throwing too many parties.
Okay.
And actually got kicked out for a reason that was not, it was like a made up reason, but it, you know, I was bad. So, I moved across the street and I moved into this apartment, and an audio engineer had been living there who I don't think I've ever actually met. And he had subscriptions, but I knew about him, or I'd heard of him, and then he left. I think he went to the city, or he got a gig in the city. This was in Rochester. It's like 1997. Or 8, maybe. I can't remember. Yeah, so I moved to this apartment, and he's got like Pro Sound News, Mix, Sound on Sound, Tape Op, and 5 other magazines, print, you know. And they kept coming. And never, so like these magazines just came for like 4 months. So I had a huge crate of all of the top industry trade papers at the time in the late 90s. And I just opened one and just flipped the pages and read them over and over. And when I first started reading them, I didn't know what anything was. So it's like,
Sure.
what are they talking about? What is all this stuff? But I was super into it, and I was like, you know, I just love listening to records. And at the time, I was excited about like production, the idea of production and stuff.
Yeah. So was it not maybe getting a 3-dimensional picture of actually the people behind who are doing these things, like the engineers and the producers? Maybe were you getting a glimpse of that, of like, oh, like that's something you can do, like I'd like to do that? Or
yeah, not so much the engineer part. It's funny because like I never thought about being an engineer so much as its own thing, and I kind of still don't actually. But it's interesting, like yeah, it was kind of just like, this is like how you get to the point where you're getting things to sound a certain way.
okay.
And I feel, you know, like that's it's definitely never stopped, and it's, if anything, it's more mysterious and bigger to me than it's ever been. And the more I learn, the more I just don't know. And it's cool because I can do a lot of stuff that I used to sweat, and like there's a lot of stuff that's like, oh, I you know, this is fairly straightforward concepts for me to like get a thing to a certain point. But then like every time you hit one of those points, it's just like the universe explodes again. You're like, oh my God, like it just like hit a new level. And it's like, yeah, most of that has to do with the ear training, I think. So it's like ear training in conjunction with learning and studying, experimenting, of course.
So are you thinking, I mean, you think more in terms of pitch than say like frequency, or when you say ear training?
Oh, no, I'm talking about like non-musical ear training. I mean, that's, of course, that's its own world of, you know, like there was a time period when I was like playing piano every day for a while, like 4 or 5 hours a day. And yeah, the 4-year-old 2-hour-a-day thing didn't come till I was 11. But then it was like when I was 11, it was like,
It was on.
by the time I was 12, I was like practicing the stuff that I was supposed to be practicing for like an hour or two, and then spending like another half hour, 2 hours just improvising or just like messing around, you know, or trying to play stuff that was like way out of my league a lot. Still. But yeah, so like, yeah, there's musical ear training, but then no, I'm talking about it's like recording stuff, like
You like taste, that sort of
I
what,
guess
what
like
works, what doesn't work.
like mixing techniques and like outboard and microphones and different tape formulations and tape decks and stuff. You know, what's going on in a room, and then like, of course, a lot for the past many years with synthesizers and drum machines and even plugins. I mean, like I spend a lot of time like testing and like doing like A/Bing stuff, trying to learn. Like there's a lot of stuff out there, and a lot of it's relatively ridiculously affordable for like how good a lot of it sounds. And so it's like the limiting factor ends up being like time. Like I want to have like the best tools in my arsenal to do like all kinds of different stuff. So I spend a lot of time like figuring out like what thing is the best at what, and
Yeah.
what I'm going to reach for when I think I want to do like something. And I feel like even in mixing, like a lot of like a huge bulk of my mixing effort and time, concentration and creative energy. When I haven't produced, or if I have, it's less because I've been building it since the beginning, but is dedicated to just like tone balance, like tone colors and just basic tones, like really like trying to identify the basic tones and what they mean, like personality wise, like who are the characters in this play or in the mix, and how do they relate to each other, and like where do they live in relationship to each other. So sort of like personify the different tones and give them their own we'll find out what their unique kind of like vision thing is, like why are they there, what are they trying to be, and then amplify that.
Sure.
So, make that pop more. So
do you find that more difficult process if, say, you're mixing something that you didn't produce or you weren't involved in the creative process? Like,
totally.
Do you have a conversation with the artist or the band? Like, how deep do you get, I guess, is my question.
It depends. I just try to read people out, and every moment into the future that is like a new second in time is like completely unknown. Anything can happen, right? So sometimes I try to like create that moment and create the future, and just if I have an idea about a thing, sometimes I'll just like do a version, you know, and just put it up and see. Sometimes people have a strong idea. Sometimes really great artists and songwriters and musicians have an incredibly powerful thing that they're doing, and they have like goddamn like they don't give a shit about what I'm thinking of, how I want to make their thing pop, which is cool, man. That's cool. Like I'm like, yes, like that's a lot of things I'm not. So yeah, I really love that. And then there's artists that are like very, very hands-on, of course, and I always appreciate that and try to like amplify that too. But yeah, it just depends. It really, really just depends. But yeah, like when I'm mixing other people's stuff that isn't that I haven't had any part in tracking or whatever, or producing, it can be frustrating and challenging, to get the thing sounding good or whatever. But not really so much as it can actually be like a great. You just learn stuff like about like a different scene or like some other ways of doing something. It's like, like this is like you put it all together and it's like some other producer's vision is a thing I would have never got going in 1,000 years. Like I just would never do it like that. So that's like super cool.
Yeah.
So.
I like if somebody sends me a session. I know everyone's different, but I like to look at the plugins and things that they have on there. Kind of what you're saying, like learning, because I'm always really curious.
Yeah.
Because I feel like even though there's a lot of like really common things that we all use and have, but it's really interesting the different ways that it was like you were saying before. We spend so much time with it, and what's sort of a very precise thing for you, it might be for me. It's like something I never even thought of as a use for it.
Yeah, totally.
It's really cool to see kind of what other people are doing.
And then I also appreciate the respect of an engineer who sends me a Pro Tools session to mix or folder of audio files, and it's just like there's just the mixer's like reset and there's no plugins.
Right.
It's just like what you got, mother.
Yeah, challenge set. Yeah,
that's great. I love that. Just build your own world. But yeah, that's your training like for all those purposes, like just within the writing, recording, arranging for recording, and for whatever else too. But and then recording, and then programming, mixing, all that stuff. Just kind of like yeah. So I read all those magazines, and then kind of like I lost my mind. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore because I'm not doing this Western art music. Nobody seems to care about it. Little did I know there'd be like this powerful like life in the future of new music, and yeah, I don't know, man. Like you just don't know what's gonna happen.
Sure. I mean, what was your what would you say your first experience after that? Did you intern at a studio, or how did you kind of get involved in that?
Most of my exposure to the studio between the late 90s and about 10 years later, when I was like, let me try to really get into this, is most of my exposure to like real studios, to the old, whatever, going to work at Sony or something, was as a musician. I did do some mixing on one of the live John Legend, the House of Blues, I think. I like pre-mixed a bunch of stuff and like did a bunch of early Pro Tools editing. I was riding this motorcycle in 2000. I started riding street bikes when I was on Wall Street. It was like kind of like losing my mind, and I was like, I need to buy a motorcycle. And I had a dirt bike when I was a kid, so like when I was 11, I guess, I think. But I never had like a street license and everything. So I had this motorcycle that I really liked, and I decided to like downsize my whole operation and sold the motorcycle and bought my first Apple device, which was PowerBook, right? PowerBook G4. Okay. Bought Logic for $1,000 when it was eMagic with the XS key, version 5, I think. And then I just started like working in the computer. So then that's kind of how I really got to whatever this is now. Is like not so much working in studios and not going to the old, the big studios with big consoles and stuff, as much as like scrappy DIY laptop recording. And I was just telling him, like, I just like when I had that PowerBook, and I was gigging a lot, and I was like taking the train a lot, and I started playing the laptop on gigs, and I was like definitely one of the first handful of people in the city, like in the area, to be like running Logic on stage and stuff.
Yeah.
It was a little, it was a stretch. Like now I'm back on the MPC. But yeah, I actually cut like a bunch of the main drum samples that I use in a lot of production still to this day, in the audio editor, in the sample editor in Logic, on the train, like in headphones. So,
right.
I just like started making beats and started recording at home, and bought a couple mics, and Imani Coppola and I made a record together called Black and White Album. That was like the first album that I made, like, myself, like on my own gear, and went through 4 Pro Tools rigs during that record, and like a couple of laptops and 2 G4 towers and a TDM rig, and it was like things just kept moving, and like we were moving, and I was on tour, and it was like I was trying to mix in hotel rooms and stuff, and I was trying to do a lot.
Well, it's funny how back then that seemed like such a crazy way to try to make a record.
Yeah.
And now that's kind of that's kind of the way we do things now, where it's broken up into different,
for
pieces.
sure. Yeah. It's funny because I've never been more like less like that than now, which is more like the old days, which, of course, like all the old ancient truths of recording are all, they're all true and they're all not true. But, I've come back. Well, I just, we didn't really have like a lot of resources back in those days. So, but it sure was fun to like, write some music and have a thing and then put it out and stuff. So, which it still is.
Yeah. And putting this space together, you said you had been in a lot of really high-end studios kind of around the States, maybe around the world. Like what was sort of when you were dreaming of putting this place together and designing it, what was kind of an aesthetic or something that you wanted to feel?
Yeah. It was funny because I've been in touch with an old friend, Anthony Resta, he's out on the West Coast now. But I was making a record with another old friend at his place, and he was on the East Coast outside of Boston. It was like 2004, 4 or 5, like maybe fall 2004, I think. And I had my like exciting tiny laptop thing that I was into, and so we went and worked in his space, and it was just like everything. It was just like a big open room, and it was like Noah's Ark of, like instruments. It was really instrument heavy, And I remember at the time his amazing engineer, Cariotti, who's just still amazing, so Cariotti, was running like OS 9 and was like, yeah, like, I'm on SCSI, man, like, screw this Firewire stuff. Or whatever, the new thing, he was just like, nah, like, I have my thing, it runs, like, I don't touch it. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a thing. But yeah, like, I was really inspired by that experience and going to work in that room. It was very not like the main, like, high-end studios that I had spent time in, and I noticed that we were much more creative than... Because I had also been working on the Alice Smith record at the Manhattan Center, and they had like 2 neat VRs and beautiful live rooms. We actually like did a bunch of writing on the grand piano in the live rooms and stuff. And I remember being in the Manhattan Center and like we couldn't find a MIDI cable for like 2 hours one night, and just being like, damn, we're like really like,
it's an expensive MIDI cable.
Yeah, like, what are we doing
about
right now? Well, we had, I don't know, whatever. I love that record. But anyway, going to Anthony's place and just seeing like the flow of ideas and the creativity and stuff was just out and around, and it was like things were just on and working. Lots of stuff was just mic'd up, and it was like, there was just like a flow, and it was really like more about the instruments being like around and kind of like really embedded within the production process. And I understood then, and I understand that that's not the optimal way to set up a commercial recording facility, right? Like, sure, like you keep a blank slate, and you have a functioning console or whatever you have at this point, hybrid setup or whatever you have. But and you have a room, and there's like everything's open, and it's adaptable, and you can do an orchestra, or you can do a rock band, or you can do scoring or whatever. But I've always just gravitated more towards whatever that seems like this thing is, just kind of like an open plan.
Sure.
And this stuff is like, I'd be hesitant to have somebody else running things in here, because I'm bad at labeling. It's like I'm working off a spreadsheet back here for like, this is like a relatively new build over here. All the synth stuff is coming up on patch bays, and like all the clocking and the the I/O, like the CV gate is all coming up on patch bays and stuff. And there's like a mini patch bay. So.
Okay. So you have pretty much, with the patch bays, you can get any of these keyboards or synths like running into Pro Tools in just a couple.
Yeah, a couple patches.
Yeah.
Like the clock is mostly coming up on the sync gen and driving everything, and so whatever DAW I'm in. I'm actually just telling, like, I just started checking out Logic again. Like, I took like a 7-year break, and I didn't really use. Or 6 years.
Well, not much has changed in Logic in 7 years,
dude. Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny. A lot has, a lot hasn't. Man, I don't know. I was just like, maybe there's something cool in there. It's been fun. But yeah, I was from the big Ableton thing, and then 90% of my day is just in Pro Tools and Vienna Ensemble Pro. But yeah, so the clock comes up, and then everything else runs off of that. But I could also drive other stuff from anything, like do sequencing on the MPC sometimes, or run one of the drum machines with MIDI and stuff. It's sequencers, just like basic stuff. But it's really nice to have the clock kind of like really central, and then the audio coming in and out. So I can just like bring stuff up in Pro Tools or whatever.
Do you try to capture, for the controllers that are MIDI capable, do you try to capture the MIDI when you're recording, or are you pretty much committing to like the sounds and just running it in as audio?
It totally depends on the part, right? So, just a few days ago, another keyboard player was in here just playing the Juno, and I'll just play it a lot. And then there's other parts that, for primarily aesthetic reasons, and then also partially technical,
right?
I feel like need to be programmed. And sometimes I hear types, different types of textures or musical ideas that I really feel like should have been programmed, and they're not, and I feel like they suffer for it. So I don't want to be like that, like if it's the machines turn to play, I really like to choose the right machine and let the machine play.
Yeah.
So, and that goes all the way down to like buying a 909 last year, just because I was like, I can't get anything to do that.
Yeah.
Wave Alchemy was close, and then there's a lot of cool other, things that are kind of almost, but like, yeah, it's just the feel wasn't there. So, and
It's a pretty sad state that we're in 2019 and we still can't get a 909 right in the box, but
it's fine. I don't know, man. Yeah, this Behringer 808 is pretty exciting. I don't know what's going to happen with that, if it even exists or what. But there's a lot of people doing a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
And there's so many new, cool, awesome things. And then the modular thing is just insane. It's like I've tried not to get like too caught up.
yeah, that's one area where I feel like my OCD and my gas would it would be a potent lethal combination. I've tried to stay away from the Euro rack.
Yeah, it's weird because there's versions of like everything that's like real studio outboard, and like capability wise, they kind of, if not sonically necessarily, but like feature wise or whatever, like, and they're all really cheap. It's just like whoa, it makes everything else seem kind of like less,
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's been great to just have a little bit of something, and but my focus always gets moved around, and it really hasn't been on that for a minute, so it'll go back. But there's, I'm always like, okay, now like this is the time when I'm really thinking about like whatever, fill in the blank, working on the piano or like trying to get the drums sounding better or something. Fixing amps,
Yeah.
modding synths, or rebuilding a new computer, which is,
So is that
100 plus
out
hours.
of necessity, or it's just sort of where your curiosity follows as far as like, and now it's time to shed the piano again, or
Yeah, I don't mean playing as much. I mean like getting instruments up to some sort of operational level that you wish that they were at. But yeah, it's mostly project dependent. But also sometimes I'll just sort of slip into an area of focus. I've actually been like not super focused on a lot of these things for a minute, and that's cool too. Like
Sure.
trying to get a new band going and stuff. And
Yeah.
Um,
You have a new record coming out, or
Yeah, I think we're gonna do the thing you're talking about, like just. Well, actually, I put a song up on the phone, so you can just call in and hear the song on the phone.
oh, nice.
But it's like I'm not done with the song yet. It's been sitting in its current state for years, which I like its current state, but I just have a few things I want to fix up about it. And then there are 9 other songs that are in the same kind of position. So I expect that I'll probably be chipping away at the stuff for the next few months, and then like drop a song here or there,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Play some shows. And the band's called Joshua Skate Party.
Great.
And it's me and Ann Courtney, and just the two of us. So.
Great.